Okay,
Gosh.
so what's the best and the worst deal you've ever done?
Well, I'll give two answers on the best deal. I think you always got to start with your first one. I think you've got to prove it works. You got to prove that you know what you're doing. You got to see that cash flow. Again, my cash flow in the first deal wasn't great. It was about $150 after we got rid of that first tenant before we did a refi, but it was proof of concept that would work, right? That Rich Dad Poor Dad was right, that yeah, we can find value. So I think the first deal is always interesting. I think the best deal outside of that was an apartment building. There was an apartment building. It's on Millbrook. It was listed for a long time at 1.4 million, 1.44 million to be exact. And it was listed for 2 years. Why was it listed at 1.44? Because that's what the previous owner bought it for. He wanted his money out. Unfortunately, this was 2012 when the whole market was rolling over. And his lender allowed him to, extend and pretend. Unfortunately, because he knew he was underwater, he did not update the property. He was being a total slumlord. And ultimately the bank was forced to foreclose. We buy it directly from the bank for $700,000. So half off. It was destroyed.
How many units?
18 units. We ultimately put about $120,000 into that building. Today it's worth, 3 million, something like that.
Wow.
So, and rents have more than doubled on that since we bought it. So, and again, that's what's coming. There's a lot of busted multifamily deals coming. And there's a lot of stuff being listed at previous purchase price that'll never sell. So extend and pretend will only last so long. But that was my best deal, that apartment building.
And then what's the worst?
I remember buying a property on Princeton that had a house in what we would call today an ADU. It was essentially a garage conversion. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't know that the garage conversion wasn't done right. They created a housing unit, but it was still on the same garage foundation, which was 1 inch thick or 2 inch thick versus 12 inches. So it wasn't to code. We ended up having to scrape that unit. So I bought something that I thought would produce 2 different parts of income and it only had one, which really made that deal skinny. So yeah, I definitely, there's some people that do ADUs wrong.
Yeah.
And that was a big mistake on my part.
Do you think anybody could be a real estate investor?
The thing that I think is different about me is I believe real estate investing is a skill. I don't think anybody is born being a real estate investor. I think it's a skill. I think it's like singing. It's like sports. If you practice it enough, you will get better. Now, will you ever be Sam Zell? Rest in peace. Will you ever be Jonathan Gray from Blackstone? No. But can you be better? Yes, you're not going to be Beyonce, but you can be a better singer with practice. And I think real estate investing is a skill, so it can be practiced and learned. You just have to be, everybody's too distracted. They're too unfocused. If you just slow down, got a narrow focus like you did when you started, things would you would start to understand the market, right? You would start to understand what an average deal is versus a great deal. That's what I would tell most people. So I believe because it's a skill, anybody could do it.
Now, what if they can't afford to take the risk? Because you hear a lot of people saying, well, it's easy for you to say because you had this job and you were able to scrape together some money. But what about me? Because I don't have anything left over. I have nothing to fall back on. If I take a risk and fail, I'm on the streets.
So what I would tell somebody in that situation is you should look into what today is called house hacking. It wasn't called that when I was, coming up. But basically, you can get into an FHA, or if you happen to serve in the military, a VA loan for anywhere between 0 and 3.5% down, up to 5% if you wanted. And if you could get into something where you take your living expense down to 0 or near 0, you're ahead of the game. There's a lot of people that talk about Starbucks and all of this and saving $6 a cup of coffee. But if you can actually go after your largest expense ex taxes, that's where it comes. So what I've told most young people is my biggest financial miss wasn't that loss in the stock market. It was not buying a fourplex at 20 when I could have, right? I could have lived in one unit. As a single guy, could have lived in one unit, and that would have set me off on an entirely new trajectory. So I think most people, if they're in that state, need to look into house hacking 3.5% down.
And who shouldn't buy real estate?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. If you're going to be an investor, if your time horizon is less than 5 years, don't even bother, right? The beauty of getting wealthy in real estate is holding for a long term. You need inflation to be your friend. Ideally, it's 10 years, but anybody who has less than 5-year timeline, don't even bother. Go do stocks or crypto or something else, not real estate for sure.
Yeah. And what are you finding in today's market?
Oh man, today's market is really tough. So I'll answer that question 2 ways. I think we're actually rolling into the slowest real estate market of my career, 20 plus years. What do I mean by that? I believe last year, the low for existing home sales annualized was 3.88 million sold. I believe we're going lower than that sometime in the next 3 to 4 months. But then we're going to be through this. I think this is the bottom in transactions for real estate agents, mortgage brokers, inspectors. But because the market is getting so slow, it actually gets me excited. Why is that? Because of all the deals I've ever done, I buy from people who don't want it, called don't wanters. And the best way to do that is a slow market. What was the hardest thing to do the last 4 years? Buy a piece of real estate, because everybody could do it. Everything cash flowed, right? Mortgage rates were low. So I think inventory is building. I think it's up 40% year on year. I think it gets worse from here. I think buyers pull back. I think this election that we have in front of us is going to cause people to pull back. They're scared, pissed off, nervous, whatever it is. But when they do that, they pull back. And I think that's going to allow people to write disrespectful offers and get some. So I think the real estate market's slowing now, but is also opportunity if you're doing the work. So I think there are great deals to be had. And then more importantly, I think people need to learn about seller financing. I think the last couple of years have been very much cash heavy, right? DSCR loans, non-QM, cash. But I think as inventory builds, you're going to have some people that want out that can't take a lower price or don't want to, but maybe they'll offer you terms. So I have done seller financing deals 5 or 6 times over the last 20 years. I think the opportunity for seller financing goes up from here because some people have to sell.